Chapter 2 A Deadly Cargo. For ways that are dark, and for tricks that are vain, the heathen Chinee is peculiar. Bret Harte. All through dinner, Bert's brain hummed with the words, "Use your eyes and ears, try to understand." Eyes and ears, what did Hargrave mean? Why didn't he tell him more? And what was Hargrave's motive in getting him a job contrary to union rules, since he had admitted having a motive? Bert was convinced now that Hargrave had some particular reason for wanting him to sail on the Queen of Asia. Perhaps the thinly veiled taunts had merely been intended to egg him on. When the meal was over, Bert wondered what they had talked about. He even wondered what he had eaten. Mrs. Hargrave excused herself, leaving Bert alone with her husband again. As they settled down before the fireplace, the doorbell rang, and a quick shuffle down the hall told them that Fong Tuck was on the job. In a few moments, he pushed open the door with his foot and entered the room, bearing in his arms a handsome ship model, some 3 feet long. "Pleasant for Mr. Hargrave," he said, and there was disapproval in his voice. He waited at the door, half-turned, as though about to take the model out again. Hargrave removed a vase from the mantel. "Put it here, Tuck." "Why, that's a model of the full-rigged ship Queen of the West. I was her skipper for 6 years, Bert, my last command. She was lost during the war, the finest salmon packet the Nushagak Salmon Company ever owned." The Chinese came forward with seeming reluctance and placed the model on the mantel above the crackling fire. Then he backed away from it, eyeing it suspiciously, and finally, still backing, which was difficult because of his trailing straw sandals, disappeared, shutting the door noiselessly. Both Hargrave and Bert were eager to inspect the model. It was a good piece of work, obviously the work of a man who knew ships. Every stay, every rope, and every block was there, and the sails were neatly furled along the yards. There were even tiny belaying pins in the pin rails at the foot of each mast, and each halyard, clewline, and buntline were properly belayed to the correct pin. The braces, too, were properly set up and belayed, as were the sheets and the tacks. The ex-captain and the boy who was soon to become a sailor on an even larger vessel than the Queen of the West lost themselves for an hour in a lively discussion of the model before them and of square-rigged ships in general. They discovered that when the gaskets were removed from the furled sails, they could be set from the deck with their own halyards, and in a few minutes the model was under all plain sail. So excited were they over their beautiful toy that they scarcely noticed that every few minutes the old Chinese sidled into the room and stood close beside them, looking at the miniature ship, and then shuffled slowly out again. At last, flushed from their excitement and the heat of the crackling fire, they returned to their chairs. "I wonder who brought it," Hargrave said. "I never thought to ask Tuck. Probably Tuck didn't like his looks and wouldn't let him in, but no doubt the man will show up later." Bert was still gazing, enraptured at the model. "I believe that the stock on the port bower anchor is broken," he said, and got out of his chair to examine it, putting his face close to the hull for a better view. Suddenly he wondered what time it was, and wondered in the same instant what had made him think of time. Oh yes, he heard a clock ticking. He glanced around the room, but failing to see the clock, drew out his own watch out of his pocket. 3 minutes of 10. How quickly the evening had passed. Though his glance failed to locate the clock, it did take in the slightly stooped figure of Fong Tuck, which stepped forward at the same instant. For the first time, the Chinese looked full at Bert. "You hear clock? No see 'em?" he asked peremptorily. "Why, yes," Bert laughed. "I did think I heard a clock, but it's no matter. You see, I have a watch." The hatchet man did not run. He merely shuffled with his knees bent slightly more than usual, but Bert doubted if he himself could have crossed the room more quickly at a run, and he had been considered a fast end on his school's 11. Before Bert was fully aware that the little man had moved, he was standing directly in front of the fireplace, his head bent forward sideways until his ear was laid against the hull of the ship model. For perhaps 4 seconds he stood there, perfectly still. Then, with a motion swift as thought, he threw one arm across the deck of the model, smashing the delicate rigging and snapping the slender spars like toothpicks. He jerked the model from the mantel and, clasping it close to his chest, darted through the door with incredible speed, and was gone. Scarcely believing his own senses, Bert looked at Hargrave, hoping for an explanation. Why didn't he dash after the Chinese and rescue the precious model before it was completely demolished? It was criminal to ruthlessly destroy so fine a piece of work. But Hargrave was speechless, first with astonishment, then with anger. "That yellow devil!" he finally exploded. "That finishes him. He's run this place for 3 years too long. That model was worth $500 if it was worth a cent." Is he insane? Bert was at a loss to account for the strange action in any other way. "Insane?" Hargrave barked the word. "No, he isn't insane. He just has funny ideas. But I'm insane to have him around. He'll be back in a few minutes with some cock and bull explanation." His first burst of anger over, Hargrave became thoughtful. "It's a queer thing, though," he went on. "Fong Tuck is always doing absurd things that he has perfectly good reason for doing." "It'll take a peach of a reason to explain that," said Bert, who felt as much wronged as though the model had been his own. They settled themselves to await Fong Tuck's return and explanation. Minutes passed, and he did not appear. From a little distance came the sound of swiftly running water, then sharp blows, as of light wood being splintered. As of one accord, Hargrave and Bert rose and started towards the sounds. At the open bathroom door they paused, wide-eyed with amazement. Bending over the bathtub, above which appeared some of the ship model's top works, was the weazened old hatchet man, holding the hull of the miniature vessel underwater with one hand, while with the other he plunged a screwdriver again and again through the thin deck. Bert started forward impulsively to stop the destruction, but stopped as he felt a hand on his arm that seemed to say, "Steady there, wait." "This'll cost you about 5 months' pay, Tuck," Hargrave said solemnly, "unless you have the best explanation you ever thought up." "How can 5 months' pay?" Fong Tuck scoffed at the idea while he went on with his work. "Toy boat, good for what? Maybe can tell time? How can?" "Just what?" Hargrave began and stopped. The hatchet man was prying out a piece of the shattered deck. In a moment he thrust his hand through the hole, pulled vigorously, and brought forth the silent, dripping works of a small clock, which he held up for inspection. "Maybe can tell time. How can?" he repeated. He bent over again and gingerly extracted 6 sodden candle-like objects from the hold of the model. Dynamite. The boy stared, dazed as from a terrific blow. The blood surged out of his face, leaving it deathly white. He turned from the death-dealing stuff to glance at Hargrave's close-pressed lips, then back at the handsome, broken ship model. The unseen clock. That clock would tell time just once, the time of their deaths. A fiendishly clever bomb. Bert picked up the clockworks, to which the dial was still fastened, and gazed at the mute hands. His work finished, the Chinese straightened up. He looked from the man to the boy, and both looked at him. Slowly a broad grin spread across the hatchet man's impassive face. "How can 5 months' pay? Maybe so you like him fine toy boat now," he said. "Tuck, you unrepentant old sinner," Hargrave laughed grimly. "The 5 months' pay will be added to your wages, not taken off. Now tell me what he looked like, the man who brought the toy ship." "Big, strong man," said Tuck. "Maybe so sailor. Catch 'em smallpox in face." "Good. Now forget what you've told me, savvy?" "Me forget already," the Chinese grinned. Bert's brain was in a whirl. In the same instant that he gloated over his luck in being alive, he found himself registering joy that the ship model was not wrecked beyond repair. He regarded Hargrave and Fong Tuck and himself as spirits risen from the grave. No, this was real enough. He fell to counting the tiles in the bathroom floor. But back and forth across the tiles and across the cells of his brain raced the question, who had tried to kill Hargrave and why? Bert felt dizzy from merely thinking the question, and from trying not to think it. Use your eyes and ears. Try to understand. Was this part of the same puzzle? Maybe Hargrave would explain now. Silently, he followed Hargrave back to their chairs, by the fire, fighting an irresistible desire to sleep. No, he was asleep. The thing was to wake up. He pinched himself. This is the second try, Hargrave was saying, half to himself. Last week, a bullet passed my head as I stepped out of my car. Now, a cargo of dynamite. What next? But who? Why? Bert stammered. Who? I have not the slightest idea, said Hargrave. As to why, there are several possibilities, but the most likely is that I am the general manager of the Nushagak Salmon Company. But, the boy choked off his question. Something in Hargrave's voice said, that's all, and Bert knew the answer to his question. It was, use your eyes and ears. He rose to go. There is nothing to be done about it yet, Hargrave said. Least of all, tell the police. But you and Tuck and I will be on the lookout for a man with a pock-marked face. Good night, Bert. Outside, Bert breathed deeply of the chill night air, left moist and fresh by the rain. A brisk, aimless walk of a dozen blocks cleared his head, but answered no questions. In fact, it raised new ones. Hargrave had hinted that he was to keep to himself the happenings of the evening. Why? And why did he intimate that the matter was to be kept from the police, above all? But the great question was, who was the pock-marked man, and why did he want to kill Hargrave? Use your eyes and ears, a voice seemed to say. On Market Street, Bert caught a streetcar and went home.